In a quiet town where everyone knows your name, one stranger's arrival changes everything. He's just a child, lost, silent, afraid. A boy with no name, no home, and a secret too heavy to carry. But what's he hiding? And why does his shadow carry the weight of a dangerous secret? And why is he running? When Ngozi chose kindness by opening her diner's door, she didn't just feed a hungry child. She stepped into a world of betrayal, ambush, and a billionaire family's darkest secrets. Who is this boy? And what forces will stop at nothing to find him? Grab a seat at table 9, where a single act of kindness ignites a tale of survival, loyalty, and hope. Where a single meal sparks a story of courage and will keep you on the edge of your seat hungry for more. Now pause for a moment. Imagine you're alone. No name, no past, no safe place to sleep. Just cold rain and aching hunger, and the fading memory of your parents' voices. Now imagine a stranger sees you, not as a problem, not as a threat, but as a child worth saving. That's where our story begins, with a choice, a single plate of jollof rice, and the warmth of one woman's kindness.
Hello guys, haven't subscribed yet? Please subscribe now, hit the like button, and leave a comment to help.
The streets of Katura, a small town nestled in the lush heartlands of central Kapi, pulsed with tension. The sun, heavy and orange, melted into the horizon as rain clouds gathered in the distance. At the edge of the town square, a neon sign, Tasty's Place. Good food, warm hearts. Inside, the clink of metal spoons and muffled laughter filled the air. The smell of roasted plantains, scent of egusi stew, and jollof rice wrapped around patrons like a hug. Ngozi, tall and soft-spoken with strong arms and quiet eyes, moved between tables, her faded apron streaked with palm oil. As the thunder rumbled in the distance, the tasty door creaked open, her eyes flicking to the clock. 6:42 p.m. Her shift dragged, her feet throbbed, but she kept her warmth for the customers, mostly workers and traders winding down after a long day. But she pressed a soft smile to her lips when she turned to greet a customer. That was when she saw him. Outside the window, standing just beyond the neon open sign, was a small boy. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. His face was tired, soaked from the rain. His clothes hung off him awkwardly, more dirt and damp than fabric now. But it was his eyes that caught her, wide, glassy, searching. Ngozi stepped around the counter and pushed the creaking door open. A gust of cold air blew in, wrapping around her like a ghost. "Nah, are you okay?" she called softly, crouching. The boy didn't speak. He glanced over his shoulder as if hunted or making sure no one had followed him, then stepped forward. His shoes squelched with water as he entered. The diners and traders turned curious, but Ngozi waved them off and led him to a corner bench, away from prying eyes. "Come sit," she said, guiding him to a booth in the corner. "You must be freezing." He sat stiffly, his small hands clutching the edge of the table like it might float away. Ngozi fetched a towel from the back and wrapped it around his shoulders. "You need something hot. Jollof. Yam porridge." He nodded, silent, his gaze darting to the door. Ngozi didn't press further. Something about his stillness, the fear in his eyes, told her questions might break him. She returned with a steaming plate of jollof rice, a boiled egg perched on top, and a cup of zobo drink, its ruby hue glowing in the dim light. The boy ate cautiously at first, then ravenously, as if the food might vanish. "What's your name?" she asked gently, sipping her own tiger nut drink. The boy paused, his jaw tensed. "I don't remember," he said, barely above a whisper. Ngozi's heart ached. It was a lie, she knew it. But it wasn't a malicious one. It was the kind of lie that children told when the truth was too big to carry. "All right," she said gently. "We'll figure it out later." "All right, nah. I'll call you nah for now." The boy gave the smallest of nods. For the rest of the evening he stayed silent in the corner booth, watching the rain streak the windows while Ngozi worked, her gaze flickering to him between serving plates of pounded yam and taking orders. He didn't ask for more food, didn't speak again. When the tasty emptied out around 10 o'clock, she brought him a piece of chin-chin. "Can't sleep hungry," she said with a wink. He took the chin-chin from her and murmured, "Dalu, thank you." When it was time to close, Ngozi hesitated. She looked around the tasty, unsure what to do. She couldn't leave him outside in the cold, but she didn't have the means to take him home either. The boy sensed it, her worry. He slid from the booth before she could speak. "I'll be okay," he said. "Where will you go?" He looked at the door, then back at her. "I'll come back tomorrow. If that's okay." Ngozi knelt in front of him, eyes searching his small pale face. "Tomorrow then. Table 9 yours." The boy gave a shy smile, a flicker of warmth in his otherwise haunted expression, and slipped out into the night. Ngozi watched him disappear into the misty street, her hand pressed to the glass. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story, but something in her gut told her this boy carried a pain far bigger than he could explain, and something in her heart told her she'd be seeing him again.
Hello guys, haven't subscribed yet? Please subscribe now, hit the like button, and leave a comment to help.
The Okafor compound in Post Town was not just a home. It was a symbol of wealth and quiet power, a fortress that watched over the city with cold confidence. Inside, a celebration was in full bloom. Chatter buzzed like electricity. Governors and generals shook hands with foreign investors. Oil barons toasted champagne with famous Nollywood actresses. Every corner gleamed with gold and polished marble. Chief Chidika Okafor, tall and imposing in a light red agbada, stood with a calculated smile. His influence extended beyond boardrooms. It reached into the underworld, whispered in military barracks, and echoed in the chambers of power. Beside him, his wife Nneka radiated elegance. Their son Chidika, no more 8, tugged at his father's sleeve. "Papa, are we leaving soon?" Emeka chuckled. "Soon, my boy. Just one more speech." But outside the compound walls, shadows were moving. That night, under the cover of fog and moonless skies, Emeka's armored convoy thundered down the quiet road surrounded by tall trees and winding paths. Post Town Kappa Expressway, flanked by elite private guards in black SUVs. The child was asleep, his head resting on his mother's lap. Suddenly, boom! A roadside IED erupted. The lead vehicle flipped like a toy, fire engulfing the sky. Gunfire exploded from the surrounding bush. Bullets rained on steel. Guards scrambled out, returning fire. "An ambush. Delta Phantom Unit." One guard screamed into the radio. "They've found us," another cried, pulling the chief down as bullets tore through windows. Betrayal. Someone had leaked their route. Emeka's security formation had been compromised. In the chaos, Emeka unbuckled Chidika. "Nneka, get down!" He looked at his wife, terrified strong. He kissed her once, then pushed open the door, but a bullet grazed her shoulder, sending her sprawling. A bloodied guard grabbed Emeka's arm. "Run, sir. It's a kill order." With Chidika clutched to his chest, Emeka bolted into the bush. Trees flashed past. Screams faded behind him. He ran until his lungs burned. They reached a hollow Iroko tree, sacred and ancient. "Hide here, Chidika. Don't come out unless you see me or Uncle Chukwuma." Emika's voice cracked. You're strong. You're brave. You're everything I ever hoped you'd be. Stay alive, Chidika. Please. He kissed his son's forehead, shoved him gently into the log. Tears streamed down the boy's face. Papa. But Emika had already turned, sprinting back toward the ambush. He didn't plan to survive. He planned to kill. They had planned this. Whoever they were, they knew the route, the timing. This wasn't a robbery. It was an execution. At the wreckage site, a deadly game played out. Emika, wounded but raging, moved like a ghost through the trees. One by one he picked off the assassins. His military training from the old war surfaced. Swift, brutal, efficient. But it wasn't enough. He spotted Colonel Jidado, his old war ally, and now his betrayer. You sold me out, Emika growled, aiming his pistol. Power is no longer with businessmen, Emika. It belongs to the gun. Shots rang. Emika fell to his knees. As his blood soaked the earth, he whispered Chidika's name. News broke. Chief Chidika Okafor. Missing, another says assassinated in ambush. But some whispered he'd fought like a lion, that he killed 5 assassins before falling. Neka, found barely alive, slipped into a coma. The Okafor empire crumbled overnight. Boardroom allies vanished, accounts frozen. Minutes later, Chidika heard the last of the gunfire, and then silence. He didn't know how long he stayed hidden. The woods creaked. The wind howled. His body trembled with cold and fear. He clutched his knees and buried his face. He didn't cry. He couldn't. Every sound felt like a threat. He waited for his father to come back. He never did. When morning broke, birds chirped as if nothing had happened. The boy crawled from the log, pale and numb, unsure where to go. The world had shifted under his feet. The safety and warmth of the Okafor estate were gone. The strong hands of his father gone. The soft lullabies of his mother gone. All that remained was a memory and the terrifying weight of silence. He walked for hours, for miles, through woods and roads and mud and sky. The suit was torn now, the polished shoes caked with dirt. He didn't feel hunger yet, only numbness, only shadows. When he saw the lights of a small town blinking in the distance, he followed them, and then he saw it. The soft glow of a tasty sign through the mist. Tasty place. The name meant nothing to him, but the smell. That smell. It smelled like food, like warmth, like something that hadn't yet been taken away. He stepped closer, heart pounding. Inside, a woman stood behind the counter, humming gently. She turned and their eyes met. The boy hesitated, then stepped forward. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the small town, where clouds of late afternoon warmth drifted like lazy spirits above the pavement. Inside Tasty Place, the steady hum of conversation blended with the soft clink of cutlery and the faint buzz of the old jukebox playing hum of Igbo highlife tune. Ngozi balanced 2 plates on her arm as she moved from table to table, her apron stained with syrup and coffee. It had been a busy day, and her feet were already protesting. But even as she navigated between booze and wiped up spills, her eyes kept drifting to table 9. The boy was there again, just as he had been the past 5 days. Same clothes, same quiet posture. He'd never asked for more than what she brought. Always polite, always still, always watching. Ngozi placed a hot yam porridge and a fresh cup of zobo on his table without a word. Yam porridge today, she said softly, smiling. The boy nodded, his small hands reaching for the chilled mug. She watched him for a moment longer. The dark circles under his eyes hadn't faded. His hands were clean now, but his shoes still had caked mud in the seams. Something wasn't right. She could feel it, like a storm forming far away. Subtle pressure in the air before the thunder. Are you sure you don't want me to call someone? She asked gently. There's got to be someone looking for you. The boy lowered his gaze. Please don't. Ngozi sighed, her heart squeezing. Okay nah. Just know you're safe here. All right. She turned to walk back behind the counter when the Tasty's front window lit up with a reflection. Dark shapes shifting across the glass like something unnatural blotting out the sun.
Hello guys, haven't subscribed yet? Please subscribe now, hit the like button, and leave a comment to help.
That afternoon, the sky cracked open, thunder roaring like ancestral drums. Then came the hum, deep and mechanical. A deep low rumble grew louder outside. Engines, big ones. The hum of conversation halted. Forks froze midair. Customers turned toward the window. Outside, 5 black SUVs rolled into the parking lot, their tinted windows gleaming beneath the fading light. People stopped mid-bite. Conversation died. The air turned electric. They came in formation, perfect, intimidating, calculated. They didn't belong in this sleepy town, nor in front of Ngozi's little Tasty. It was the kind of thing you saw in movies just before something bad happened. The engines shut off. Ngozi felt her heart climb up into her throat. The doors opened all at once with a synchronized click. Men in sharp suits stepped out, 4 from each vehicle. Broad shoulders, cold eyes, wired earpieces. Their hands remained at their sides, but there was an edge to their presence like weapons ready to be drawn. Every head in the Tasty was turned now. No one spoke. No one moved. Ngozi's first instinct was to step between the boy and the door. But the men didn't enter right away. They stood in a wide arc, forming a protective path from the furthest SUV, as if waiting for someone. Then a 6th car door opened, and a man stepped out. Older, dignified, wearing an agbada laced with silver thread. He moved with grace, but his eyes were fire. His face was lined with age, but his posture was straight and proud, dressed neatly, and a pair of gloves were tucked beneath one arm. He looked around the parking lot with sharp eyes, then approached the Tasty with calm, purposeful steps. The bell above the door jingled lightly as he entered. Ngozi instinctively placed herself in front of table 9, tension rising in her chest. The man paused. Then he saw the boy, Master Chidika. His voice cracked. Just a little, just enough. Ngozi looked back at the boy. He had stood up now. Slowly, cautiously. Recognition bloomed on his face. Mr. Chakuma, he whispered. The man, Mr. Chakuma, crossed the room in swift, deliberate strides, then knelt before the boy, eyes glistening. Thank God, he breathed. Thank the stars. You're alive. Chidika didn't move for a moment. Then he launched forward, wrapping his arms around the older man's neck, burying his face into his shoulder. Sobs breaking free as he kept crying. Gasps echoed throughout the Tasty. Ngozi stood frozen, her mind racing. The Okafor family. Whispers of their wealth, their enemies, their power had reached even this small town. Mr. Chakuma gently pulled back to examine the boy's face. We've been searching every hour. I feared the worst. Your parents, his voice faltered, his composure cracking. They would be so proud of you. You survived, my boy. You did exactly what your father asked. Chidika's lower lip quivered. He said you'd find me. Mr. Chakuma nodded. I swore I would. I never stopped. One of the suited men stepped forward and whispered something into his ear. Mr. Chakuma gave a short nod, then turned to Ngozi. His eyes softened. You're the one who's been caring for him. Ngozi blinked, caught between awe and disbelief. I just fed him. I didn't know. He stepped forward and took her hand with both of his, bowing his head deeply. Miss, he said reverently. You may have saved the last heir of the Okafor family. Your kindness will never be forgotten. Ngozi stood speechless. The Okafor family. She'd heard that name before in news stories on TV attached to tech empires and billion-dollar foundations. And she had been feeding their missing heir chin-chin, jollof rice, yam partridge, and cups of zobo for the past 5 days. The boy Chidika looked up at her, his eyes full of gratitude. I told them about you, he said quietly. That you were the only one who helped me. The men moved with quiet urgency now, creating a secure perimeter around the tasty. Mr. Chukwuma spoke into a device clipped to his jacket. Neka heard terms like extraction secure, confirm subject, and proceed to alpha route. It was all too much. Chidika stepped forward, wrapping his small arms around Neka's waist. "Thank you," he whispered. She hesitated only a second before kneeling and hugging him tightly. "You be safe, all right," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore." "I know," he murmured. But danger was far from over. Suddenly, the lights in the tasty flickered once. Then everything went dark. A split second later, a boom erupted outside, followed by the unmistakable crack of automatic gunfire. Screams pierced the air, shattering the tasty's peace like glass. Ngozi's heart seized in her chest. "They found us," barked one of the suited men near the door, yanking a pistol from his holster. "It's the Delta Phantom Unit assassins." Mr. Chukwuma's voice was no longer that of a gentle uncle. It was thunder. "Get the boy out now. Now!" Chaos ignited. Tasty screamed, ducking beneath tables. Windows exploded inward as smoke grenades rolled across the linoleum floor. Red tracer bullets flashed through the haze. The once quiet Tasty was now a war zone. Ngozi didn't think, she just moved. She grabbed Chidika's trembling hand and yanked him toward the back kitchen. "Stay with me," she shouted over the din. A guard shielding their retreat was hit. He went down in a gurgle of blood and shattered glass. Another guard returned fire from behind the dessert counter, dragging a patron to safety. Chidika stumbled, coughing from the smoke, but Ngozi kept pulling him. A chair flew past her head. Plates shattered. They burst through the swinging kitchen doors, slipping on a patch of spilled oil. Neka caught her balance and shoved through the rear exit into the alley, lungs burning. Gunfire followed them. A black-clad assassin, tall, agile, face obscured by a tactical mask, appeared at the alley's end. He raised his weapon. Ngozi's breath caught. Then clang! She hurled the nearest thing she could grab, a heavy metal ladle. It struck the man's helmet with a dull thud, just enough to stagger him. With a primal yell, she lunged, slamming into him with her shoulder. They crashed to the ground, struggling. "Run, run, Chidika!" she cried, grappling with the assassin's arm. "To the black SUV. Oh, go!" The boy hesitated, but only for a second. Then he turned and ran, legs pumping. One of the guards appeared from the smoke and swept him up, hauling him into the vehicle just as it roared to life. Ngozi screamed as the assassin slammed her head against the pavement. And then bang! Single shot. A well-aimed shot that took off the assassin breath. The weight slumped off her. The sound re-echoed and reverberated throughout the tasty walls as everywhere went silent. Mr. Chukwuma stood over her, revolver in hand. His face was wild with fear. "You will not die today," he whispered, kneeling beside her. His gloved hands pressed against the side of her bleeding head. Everything blurred. The last thing Ngozi saw before fading out was the SUV peeling into the distance, Chidika's face pressed to the window, one small hand raised. 4 days later, Obodo General Hospital. Ngozi awoke to the quiet hum of machines and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Her vision blurred for a moment, then sharpened slowly as she took in the sterile white walls, the muted rhythm of a heart monitor beside her, and the soft sunlight bleeding through the window. Flowers crowded the windowsill, fresh, not from a store, picked by hand. Guards stood watch at the door. She tried to sit up, and a nurse hurried to her side. "You're safe," the nurse whispered. "You're in Obodo. You've been asleep for 4 days." Ngozi's head pounded, but one question forced its way from her lips, hoarse and urgent. "The boy, Chidika." The nurse smiled gently. "They got him out. He's safe. They told us not to tell you more, but they said you were the reason he survived." Tears welled in Ngozi's eyes and slid silently down her cheeks. Relief hit her so hard it felt like grief. She turned her face into the pillow and sobbed, not just for the danger they escaped, but for the hole his absence had left behind. She had protected him. And now he was gone.
Hello guys, haven't subscribed yet? Please subscribe now, hit the like button, and leave a comment to help.
2 weeks later. Tasty place. The damage had been cleared. The shattered glass replaced. The floors mopped clean of blood and smoke. To most, the tasty place had returned to normal. Jollof rice, yam partridge, and cups of zobo still poured, and the bell above the door still chimed the same friendly note. But to Ngozi, everything had changed. She moved through the motions like a ghost, taking orders, filling mugs, smiling when she had to, but her eyes always drifted to the corner booth. Table 9. She wouldn't seat anyone there. Couldn't. The cushions still held the shape of his small frame in her mind. She still heard his laughter. His whisper in the kitchen. The way he'd held her hand with silent trust. At 4:17 every afternoon, the time he used to come in, her hands would pause whatever they were doing. Her eyes would flick to the door. But it never opened. Until one cloudy Wednesday. The bell above the door jingled. A gust of cool air followed. A tall man in a crisp black suit entered. Handsome, imposing, and slightly out of place against the Tasty's faded charm. His steps were deliberate, his eyes kind. Ngozi Okafor, he asked. She nodded, unsure. He reached inside his coat and handed her a thick ivory envelope, sealed with a silver crest, an ornate O wrapped in a laurel wreath. My employer asked me to deliver this to you personally. Before she could ask anything, he offered a respectful nod, turned, and left as quietly as he had come. Ngozi stared at the envelope. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten in fine, deliberate script, the kind that carried both discipline and heart. Dear Miss Ngozi, you didn't know my name. You didn't know who I was. But you fed me. You protected me. You saw me. You gave me more than food. You gave me safety and something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Because of you, I remember what kindness feels like. Because of you, I'm not afraid anymore. Thank you. Yours always, Chidika Okafor. Ngozi folded the letter carefully, pressed it to her heart, and closed her eyes. A single tear slipped down her cheek, this time not out of sorrow, but out of something gentler, steadier. Oh. She looked toward the door once more, not out of longing this time, but gratitude. Wherever he was no longer lost. And she would never forget him. 3 weeks later. Tasty place. The sky outside was the color of smoke, bruised clouds rolling over the hills, heavy with the promise of rain. Ngozi flipped the closed sign on the Tasty's door and sighed, wiping her hands on a faded dish towel. She hadn't stopped thinking about the letter. She kept it in her apron pocket like a charm, sometimes taking it out just to read the final line again. Yours always, Chidika Okafor. The name still didn't feel real. It felt like something from a novel, or a dream that ended too soon. She was stacking napkin holders when headlights bathed the Tasty in pale gold. A sleek black car, a Rolls-Royce maybe, glided to a stop outside. Her heart skipped. A moment later, the same sharply dressed man who had delivered the letter stepped inside. This time he smiled. Miss Ngozi Okafor, he said. I apologize for the late hour. I have come with a formal request from the Okafor family. He held out a second envelope, longer than the first, edged in gold, the paper thick enough to be mistaken for velvet. Ngozi hesitated, hands trembling slightly as she accepted it. The seal was different this time, an engraved O over a golden tree. The man inclined his head. A car awaits to take you. Tonight, if you're willing. Take me where? She asked, breath catching. To the Okafor estate, he replied with a soft smile. The young master insists. Later that night, the Okafor estate. The car wound its way through narrow hilly roads, past massive stone gates and forests lit by moonlight. Ngozi could barely see the end of the long driveway lined with lanterns. And then, the mansion appeared. No, not a mansion. A fortress of glass and stone, perched on the edge of a cliff, its lights glowing like golden veins in the night. Waterfalls spilled from carved lion mouths along the walls. Ivy curled along marble columns. Armed guards stood in the shadows, silent and still. The car stopped. A butler approached and opened her door. "Miss Ngozi," he said, bowing. "Welcome to House Okafor." Inside, everything smelled of cedarwood and old books. Floors polished to mirrors. Hallways filled with oil paintings and chandeliers that looked like falling stars. She was led through a grand corridor and up a sweeping staircase into a quiet library. There he was, Chidika, no longer in mud-stained sneakers, but in a soft navy sweater. His dark hair combed neatly. His face still boyish but wiser somehow. He looked up from a book and smiled so wide it made her knees weak. "Ngozi," he breathed. She stepped forward slowly. "You're really here." He ran to her, no hesitation, and threw his arms around her. Just like before. Only this time there was no fear. "Joy. I told them I wouldn't stay unless I saw you again," he said fiercely, voice muffled against her jacket. "You're my family too." Ngozi couldn't speak. She knelt and hugged him tighter, tears spilling freely now. Then came a voice from the doorway. "Mr. Chakuma, dressed in midnight blue." He nodded respectfully. "Miss Ngozi, on behalf of the Okafor family, I wish to formally thank you for your bravery. The boy is our heir, but he is also a child, and it was your kindness, not our wealth, that saved him." He stepped forward and handed her a leather-bound envelope. Inside was a deed. Her name, printed in elegant script. "To a cottage on our eastern grounds," he explained. "Should you ever wish to stay, and should you ever wish to leave the tasty behind, a place here will always be waiting for you." Ngozi stared in disbelief. I don't know what to say." Chidika answered for her, tugging her hand. "Just say yes." She laughed through the tears, still kneeling. "I'll think about it," she whispered. But in her heart she already knew.
Hello guys, haven't subscribed yet? Please subscribe now, hit the like button, and leave a comment to help.
Weeks later, Ngozi's table. A second gift arrived, tucked inside a sleek white box tied with a navy ribbon. A golden key and a note in Chidika's familiar script. "You always opened your door to me. This time let me open one for you." With it was a deed to a glass-walled restaurant in uphill Cape Port. Ngozi's table. Fully paid, renovated, licensed, staffed, with a top-tier management team ready. A photograph showed its elegant wooden sign, etched in gold, glowing on a bustling corner. Ngozi sat hard in a booth, heart hammering. It was too much. She was just a waitress, not a restaurateur. Yet the memory of Chidika curled up in her Tasty's booth, sipping Zobo, flickered in her mind. She had asked for nothing, yet she had been seen. Word spread fast. On opening night, Ngozi's table drew the governor and many dignitaries, food critics, bloggers, and it was tagged Cape Port's most exciting new spot. Ngozi in a sleek blazer served jollof rice herself, whispering extra yam porridge to a boy in the corner booth. Table 9 reserved forever. 2 weeks after opening, the Okafor estate. A sleek black town car pulled up to Ngozi's table just after closing. A server, wide blown-eyed, whispered, "There's a man outside. He says he's here to escort you." Outside, the suited driver bowed. "Miss Ngozi, Master Chidika would be honored if you join him for afternoon tea at the Okafor estate. With Zobo, if you prefer." She smiled despite herself. The ride to the estate was like entering a novel. Towering gates, hedges trimmed like art, a colossal mansion of stone and ivy. Inside, small signs of Chidika's presence warmed the grandeur. A paper plane on the stairs, a baseball glove on a table, cookie crumbs trailing mischievously. Not the kind of place a tasty waitress from upstate ever imagined stepping foot inside. The car came to a gentle stop in front of an ornate fountain shaped like a pair of outstretched wings. The front doors opened before she even reached them. "Ngozi!" Chidika's voice called from the upper hall. He ran down the grand staircase in a too-big hoodie, book in hand, and hugged her fiercely. "You came. Of course I did, kid, she said, crouching to meet his embrace. In the sun-drenched solarium, they sat among ferns and orchids, a table set with delicate porcelain and tiny cakes. Ngozi reached for a lemon tart, nearly dropping it when Chidika whispered, "These are awful. Mr. Chukwuma makes me eat them to look proper." She laughed, nearly spitting her tea. "Then why invite me for them?" "Because I like seeing someone who laughs at all the fancy stuff." He leaned back, sighing happily. "I miss your tasty. The squeaky fan, the chin-chin with a crusty edge. It felt like I could breathe there." Ngozi tousled his hair gently. "I miss you too, sweetheart." As they sipped tea, she realized the mansion, the legacy, the wealth. It all faded in that moment. He was just her boy and she was home. The revelation. Okafor Estate, late evening. But the story wasn't over. The library of the Okafor Estate was a cocoon of silence, its walls lined with ancient books and lit by the soft glow of chandeliers. Detective Anthonia stood at the head of the mahogany table. Her expression softened but her voice steady as steel. "Proof," she said, opening a worn folder that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Chidika sat rigid, his young face a mask of anticipation, while Ngozi stood nearby, her arms crossed, a quiet dread tightening her chest. "It began with whispers," Anthonia said, her words slicing through the stillness. Namdi's resentment had been growing for years. Sidelined in Okafor Industries, he was left to crunch numbers and sign contracts while Emeka, his brother, became the beloved face of the empire. Namdi had wealth, respect, but never admiration. Never love, not the way Emeka did. She paused, her gaze settling on Chidika, whose hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles paled. Jealousy turned to poison and then to a plan. She turned a page, revealing a chilling blueprint. A network of hired assassins, professionals trained for a flawless ambush to erase Emeka, his wife and their heir Chidika, in one brutal strike. No survivors, no rival claims to the Okafor legacy. Namdi would emerge as the sole patriarch, cloaking his coup in grief, ensuring no one probed too deeply. But Chidika had survived, a single thread that unraveled the entire tapestry. One of the assassins was caught last month trying to flee the country. Anthonia continued, sliding forward a page of damning evidence. Emails, hidden accounts, a transfer to an offshore company Namdi had created under a false name. Mr. Chukwuma, standing by the door, clenched his jaw, his usual composure fracturing into barely restrained fury. "And now?" Chidika's voice was a whisper, fragile yet resolute. "He's in custody," Anthonia replied. "Namdi faces federal charges next week. The board at Okafor Industries is being briefed, and a public statement will follow once the legal process begins." Her tone softened, almost hesitant. "But before he was taken, he made a statement. We didn't release it, but I thought you should know." She drew a typed page from the folder and read aloud. "I did what I had to do. Emeka was a fool. He gave everything away. Money, power, influence, to the poor, to charity. He was soft. That boy would have ruined the family legacy. I protected what was ours." Chidika didn't flinch, but Ngozi saw it. A faint twitch in his eye, the quiet fracture of a boy discovering that monsters could wear the faces of family, could sit at the same table, could share his blood. The air grew colder, the weight of betrayal settling like a fog. Later that night, the music room. Ngozi found Chidika in the music room, seated at the grand piano beneath a stained glass window, its colors muted by moonlight. He stared at the keys, hands still, as if they held answers he couldn't reach. She sat beside him, silent at first, letting the hush of the room speak for them. "Want to break something?" she asked softly, a hint of mischief in her voice to pierce the gloom. He chuckled, a faint, broken sound. "Would it help?" "No," she said, leaning back against the bench. "But it'd feel good for about 5 seconds." They sat in the quiet, the ticking of an old wall clock and the whisper of wind outside the only sounds. Chidika's voice came raw and low. I don't understand how someone can hate you for being happy. My dad just wanted to help people. He told me once, if you're lucky enough to have more than you need, you build a longer table, not a higher fence. Ngozi smiled faintly, her heart aching. Sounds like a good man. He was. Chidika's fists tightened. And my uncle, he took them away because of money. She placed a gentle hand over his. Your uncle doesn't define your family, Chidika. You do. He turned to her, his eyes carrying a depth too old for his years. You're part of my family now too, he whispered. Ngozi blinked, warmth flooding her chest. You're stuck with me, kid. He looked down at the piano, then pressed a single key. A low note drifted through the room, followed by another. Soon he played a quiet melody, aching and beautiful. Not a song Ngozi recognized, but one that felt like healing itself. It was the sound of a boy reclaiming his story, note by note, each chord a step toward light. The next morning the world reacts. By dawn, the world was ablaze with headlines. Okafor family scandal. Uncle arrested in assassination plot. Stock markets trembled, commentators speculated, and social media churned with outrage. But behind the Okafor estate's cold stone walls, Chidika slept soundly for the first time in months. Not because justice had begun, but because the truth, however brutal, had set him free. Years later, a legacy reborn. The years unfolded like seasons, each turning like pages in a well-loved book. The trees lining the Okafor estate bloomed, burned, and bloomed again. Chidika was no longer the frightened boy from Table 9. Now a young man, he stood taller, surer. His eyes reflecting a world seen at its most fragile, yet he chose grace over vengeance. The world knew his name, not as a victim but as a beacon. His speeches inspired crowds, his foundation for child safety grew nationwide, and his innovations in education reform drew the attention of presidents and kings. Ngozi watched it all, not as a bystander but as family. That Harmattan justice was served in full. Namdi Okafor, guilty of conspiracy to murder, fraud, and treason against the family name, was sentenced to life in prison. His fortune, hidden in shell accounts, was seized and redirected by Chidika into the Okafor Foundation for Orphaned and Displaced Children. Ngozi was named an honorary trustee. I don't know how to run a foundation, she said, stunned. Chidika smiled, his eyes bright with mischief. You didn't know how to run a city restaurant either. And yet, here we are. Ngozi's table, the post-town restaurant gifted by Chidika, thrived. She still served chin-chin herself, reserving Table 9 for him alone. On quiet nights, they'd sit there, sharing zobo and stories, laughing over burnt jollof rice in the estate's massive kitchen or watching ducks swim in the garden's tranquil pond. You gave me safety when I had none, Chidika told her one evening, his voice steady as they sat beneath the estate's blooming jacarandas. A place to rest when the world made no sense. You don't forget that. Ngozi looked at him, not as a billionaire or prodigy, but as the boy she'd wrapped in a towel and fed jollof rice on a rainy night. You've done all right, kid, she said, brushing away a tear. Only because you were there when it mattered, he replied, his smile soft but sure. One morning, a new sign appeared outside Ngozi's table, carved in mahogany and polished to a gleam. Welcome to Ngozi's table, where every seat tells a story. Inside, Table 9 remained untouched unless Chidika was there. It belonged to no one else, a quiet testament to a bond forged in silence, warmth, and shared nights of rain and zobo. Some bonds, made not by blood or fortune, but by kindness, endure forever. And as the flowers danced in the wind outside, Ngozi knew she hadn't just given Chidika a seat at her table. She'd found her own place in the world, right beside him. Now here's the real question. When the world turns its back on someone, would you look away too? Or would you do what Ngozi did? Reach out, offer a seat, and change a life forever? Let us know in the comments. What would you have done if that boy walked into your life? Your words might just inspire someone else to be the reason another heart keeps going. Hit that like button and subscribe to join us in building a community where every act of hope counts.
Hello guys, I hope you enjoyed our stories. Please hit the like button, leave a comment below and subscribe to our channel.